What's up, idobi Radio? It's Fish, and I'm very stoked right now to be sitting here with Anti-Flag. What's up?
Hello. Yeah, it's a nice, lovely morning. We're having conversational breakfast together, which is an interesting thing to do. But yeah, this is a really cool space. Thanks for having us.
Oh, anytime. Very stoked to have you guys in studio, and very stoked because you guys are really, in my eyes, like one of the last real punk bands out there.
Slowly going the way of the buffalo. No, yeah, I think that there's a lot of punk rock that's happening. There's not a lot of punk rock that does it the way that we do, and that's cool. I think that for me, punk rock is far more of an ethic and far more of a lifestyle decision that you make than it is an aesthetic or a music or a genre or any of those things. Like, we're far more interested in finding our intersectionality as humans, fighting injustice of the economic and social kind any chance we can see it, and we use the songs that we sing and the art that we create to do so. And I think that there is always going to be someone who is 15, 16 or younger in their bedroom, and they see the normalization of racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia and bigotry of any kind that's coming out of offices of power like the White House, like what you have with Donald Trump. There's always going to be someone who sees that and wants to confront that, and in that moment punk rock is born. So whether or not our band is here doing it, I don't think any of that matters to the length and the longevity of what punk rock will be. So it's always going to be happening. It's always there's always going to be someone who is empathetic and caring about more than just themselves. And so in that respect, while there might not be a lot of bands that play guitars right now, there's a lot of people that have empathy as their core motivation and agenda.
Definitely. And you mentioned longevity. Your first album, Die for the Government, came out over 20 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys have been doing it for 20 years, and I was reading up, and it doesn't seem like you guys really had like that hiatus period or like a break period. You've just been going straight through.
No, we should have.
Yeah, we should have. We can still do it.
We're gonna break up right now.
Peace out.
It's funny because we'll play a lot of festivals and we have a lot of friends in bands who did that, who took breaks and took hiatuses or broke up and then came back, and now they're like bigger than ever, and we'll look at ourselves and go like, shit, maybe we should have done that. But the reality is that we've never had an intention to do any of the things we've done. For us it was play a show in Pittsburgh, and then play a show in New York, and then see if we can get to LA, and then from LA, can we get to London? Can we get further? And now we've
can we make this record? Can we make another record?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those things. You're living it. You're doing it. It's what you love to do. It's what you enjoy. It's something you believe in, and so you just wake up one day and you're taking the next step.
Yeah.
And so so when you look back on it, it can go by like in a flash, and it's not, but it's an experience that we've, I think, learned a lot from and grown from as a result. We see the value in it. We see the rewards and the results of it. When you play a show and you meet somebody who says, I saw your band 10 years ago. Because of your band, I became an environmental activist, or I became a human rights attorney. And you realize that, wow, we sort of naively started this band just knowing that we wanted to say something, and hoping that could somehow have an impact on the world, not understanding how it might have an impact on the world. And then all these years later, you meet the people who are the result of you playing in this band. And that is something that's really inspiring, and I think that's something that's really gratifying for all the kind of struggles that a person goes through, especially being an artist for 20 years, and you realize that there is a tangible gain at the end of all that time.
Definitely. And you guys have definitely had a lot of influence and definitely have caused a lot of talks, including like the government even praising you guys for some of your work you guys have done.
Yeah,
that
it's-
doesn't happen very often. Yeah. That's sort
Yeah.
of like the phrase "the cops praising you"
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
work
yeah.
that you've done.
No, I mean we've had instances where the awareness that we've tried to raise via the activism of the band has come in contact with politicians, and
Yeah, and we'll take allies wherever we can get them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
So so I don't think it's necessarily an issue of us being praised. If we go back in time to that day where we did have this like meeting at the Capitol building in D.C. and we talked about a provision that we were combating that was from Bush era politics that was giving high school students records over to the military. And when we grew up, that was an opt-in form that you had to fill in yourself.
If you wanted the military to have your info,
Yeah.
you would have to say, yes, please give my information to the military. What we found was that it had the No Child Left Behind Act had a provision in it where you actually had to request that your information not be shared with the military.
Yeah.
And we saw that as predatory military recruitment. We saw it as an invasion of privacy, and so it was something that we wanted to get involved with, especially because it was happening at a time during the Iraq War, which we saw as a very unjust war. And it's quite often, you hear politicians over and over again say that we have this all volunteer army. But I mean, we were poor kids growing up. We had friends that were in the military because they really saw no other option to climbing out of their economic circumstance. So, and we watched as we saw military recruiters prey on our friends. And we knew people that ended up in Iraq. We thought it was an unjust war. We know that when they signed up to go to the military, they didn't sign up to fight and kill for oil in Iraq. That's not what they were doing. So we wanted to get involved with that, and it turned out that there were some Congress people who agreed with the stance that we were taking and reached out to us and asked us to partner with them to work on the issue of predatory military recruitment.
My kind of point to send us down that road was that if you were the fly on the wall that day and you walked around the Capitol building with the anti-flag, you would see that the government wasn't really praising us.
Yeah.
They weren't. They looked at us pretty snide-eyed as we went through the halls of the Capitol building. But it was a great experience, and another example of if you are willing to be amicable and open to any and all experiences, you might find more commonality than you might expect. So we did find some commonality with several lawmakers that day and worked to change that, and thankfully that provision was changed. That is one of the tangible victories you can kind of hang your hat on and say, like, the punk rock kids won that day. So
Hell yeah, you did. Now, what administration was that during?
that was Bush. Yeah, that was
Okay.
Bush. Yeah.
So, being you guys have been a band for 20 years now, you've been through a bunch of administrations, like 4 or 5 at this point?
Yeah, it's-
Clinton. So I mean, and every one of them, I would say it has been an administration that we've been able to identify issues that we had problems with and that we rallied against. Starting with Clinton, then into Bush, then into
The
Obama, and now into Trump.
Yeah. Now, have you found your style of writing has changed a little bit from administration to administration? Some songs angstier, some songs.
I think that more than anything, the atmospherical things change. Punk rock and politics come in and out of fashion. And, going back to your original question about us being a band as long as we have and not taking a break and not pausing the work, it's much less of a byproduct of success or not success. It's about the fact that we've just basically been able to maintain the entire time, and I think that a similar trajectory goes into who's in political power while the band is operating. So you have these moments where the light gets shined on you because the amount of folks that were against the Iraq War grew to such intense numbers, and then people were looking for a musical or an artistical outlet that was in line with that, and anti-flag fell into that category. Or you fast forward to now with Donald Trump, where you have more people than ever who are awakening to the political agenda that's in front of them, that have friends in gay and lesbian and transgender communities, that have friends in Muslim communities and immigrant and refugee communities. These are folks that are being scapegoated by the Trump administration, and they're looking for allies. And anti-flag has constantly been an ally of folks from marginalized communities. So I think that light gets shown on us then. But that ability to transcend from playing to 60 people to 600 people to 60,000 people, we'll do it always. And it allows us to navigate these moments in history whenever it seems like people are really tuned into politics, or even 2 years ago with Obama, where people had kind of washed their hands and been like, oh, well, we elected a progressive president, we can take some time off. And what did taking time off lead us to?
And we were there. I mean, there was a lot of issues with Obama that we had. He deported more people than any president before him. He ramped up George Bush's drone war. I mean, he didn't prosecute one single Wall Street banker who's responsible for the financial crisis of 2008. I mean, it's, I think that for us as individuals, we never stopped seeing injustice. So I think in that respect, we were always inspired to write and always inspired to confront authority whenever they were abusing their power, or when they were not living up to the ideals of their office. And for that reason, I think, too, that's just another reason that we just continue to push forward and keep creating and doing what we do.
Definitely. And now in 2017, we have people like Kevin Lyman speaking up, this is I forgot the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, okay, the world's kind of going to shit. Punk music is kind of going to strive at this point.
Yeah.
And perfect timing for American Fall to get released.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we never really buy into this rhetoric of, whenever Republicans are in power, whenever pieces of shit are in power, we get good punk music.
Yeah.
I think there's great punk music all the time. It's just whether or not people are tuned into it or not.
Yeah. Which comes back to the point you were making earlier.
Yeah. And we're okay with that. I think that it would be really antithetical to this idea that we predicate our band upon, that we think that all people should be given a fair shot and have equity in the things that they're doing. And I think that if we really dug our heels in and said, no, you didn't listen to us 5 years ago, you're a bad person, there's no time for any of that bullshit.
No, you create, and you create based on what's happening in the day and what you're inspired by. And whether people find it at that particular time, that's up to them. But I think the fact, though, is that if you are creating whenever people need you, you're there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening right now with punk rock, where there's so many people that are being scapegoated. Whether it's women, African Americans, Muslims, refugees, and the reality is these people are under threat. When you look at what happened in Charlottesville, you literally had neo-Nazi fascists who killed a person. And the point is that it's important that there is a voice out there saying to these people who are being scapegoated and people who are being attacked that we're not going to forget about you. We're going to be there for you. We're going to fight for you. And that's an important message that we're putting forward with our record, American Fall, because we want those people who are under attack to understand that they're not alone.
Yeah.
Because right now is a time when they do feel very afraid and they do feel alone. And it comes down to the fact that if you don't stand up for people today, you'll be the next one on the list when they're done with them. And that's history shows that that's the direction that authoritarian governments take. And Donald Trump and the people that he's surrounded himself with are the classic case authoritarian style leadership as far as it comes to a government.
And I think with that being said, when you're talking about standing up for other people's rights and stuff, when the wall falls, you guys have the statistics of the wrongdoings towards these groups of people, whether it be transgender, police brutality. Now, police brutality is an issue that I've seen both sides of, being my dad was a NYPD officer for 20 years.
Wow.
I saw the good people,
Yeah.
and I saw the shit people.
Yeah.
So I think it's good that you guys are putting literal statistics instead of just like leaving it open to interpretation like a lot of bands. Like, and
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like maybe it was kind of a part two to another one of your music videos you had with a very similar concept.
Yeah. This is the end also had
Yes.
a similar vibe to it too, and I think that you're dead on. I mean, in a world where this idea of fake news and all of this, like, you know, the tweets and it's so loud and it's so distorted and it's so impossible to see what's happening, we're constantly trying to bring a human element to it, because more folks than you would ever imagine have the same situation happening to them that you had. And we're often penetrated or pushed around by whether it's consumerism or whether it's advertisements or whether it's just this idea that, you know, if you don't have the next new thing, you're not going to be good enough. If you don't have this kind of friend, you're not going to be loved. These are such superficial and such divisive stances that it's really about putting actual numbers and actual facts in front of people and saying, like, look, everyone has women in their lives that they love. We should be fighting for women's equality. You might not know it, but in your family, someone is a gay or a lesbian or a transgendered person, and we've got to have love and empathy for these people. And not just have that empathy, but actually act on that empathy and stand up for them. And so the record and the songs, they're all about just like raising our hands and being counted as amongst allies for people that feel like they're at the end of the barrel of the gun of those in power.
Yeah, and in the end, you know, it's funny because, you know, we sit here and we talk about these issues and they're serious and, you know, it can feel heavy, but, you know, we actually wrote what I think is a really empowering record, and it's a record of solidarity, and ultimately at the end of the record, you know, we want people to feel empowered. We want people to feel optimistic, because we actually do feel optimistic. You know, I think that, you know, right now, you know, where we are at a place where things are really heavy and there's a lot of ugliness, but there's also a lot of awareness being created. There's a lot of people who are sleepwalking or apathetic, who all of a sudden they're awake and they're in the game and they're organizing, you know. And so the backlash to this is very tangible. You can already see it forming, and, you know, that gives me an optimism of, you know, I think we can actually move in a direction that's much more progressive than where we were. You know, if you look at where we were with Barack Obama, it is true that the economic system that he was responsible for upholding was one that left a lot of people behind. It's true that before this time, the issue of racism hasn't really been discussed in the way it's being discussed now. It wasn't confronted in the way it's being confronted now. You know, our society can't move forward until we're forced to look at these injustices. So right now I think we're at a point where, because we are having these discussions, we have and because we have people that actually are feeling threatened and in danger, there is a motivation for people to act, and I think that we can move much further past where we were before.
Yeah, and that's an optimistic.
The hole we're in now.
That's an optimistic feeling to have the empowerment to write your own future. And I'm hopeful that that's what people take away from the record, and that's what people take away from Anti-Flag in 2017, is that this is a celebration of a community of folks that have found each other, and in finding each other, recognize we have far more in common with each other than we do with the Donald Trumps of the world. And if we put our heads together, we can build something that's far more beautiful and far more worthwhile, and hopefully a much more peaceful and just world.
Definitely. And songs like American Attraction, I listen to a song and I kind of sense like a little satirical lyrics when it's like, got your guns, got your drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel like guns and drugs are at a worse problem than they've ever been in the country, just listening to that song?
Well, I don't think that they're necessarily a worse problem than they've ever been. I think they've been a problem for a long time, and there's different elements to each issue that you could examine. But I think that the greater point being made is that what is glorified in American culture, and ultimately at the end of all of it, it leads back to profit. It usually leads back to profit for a very small group of people, and I think when you hold up profit as the number one institution or the number one value in your country, it leads to a disconnect between people. And instead of people finding meaning in their lives and meaning in the relationships that they're forming with each other, if they're only chasing after profit, there's going to be an emptiness at the end of that. And I think that unfortunately that leads to a decay in society. It leads to things like the tragic shooting that we saw in Las Vegas, the tragic kind of school shootings that we see over and over again. It leads to things like Charlottesville. So I think the greater point being made is that what do we value, and where have our values led us?
Nice. I agree 100% on that. And just getting back to kind of like what you guys have influenced, we talked about the new album. Very stoked for that. Obviously, that comes out November 3rd, American Fall. Everyone has to go check that out. And do you think you guys have really like led the forefront for albums like American Idiot to be released, War on Errorism by NoFX, and then like even like Beyonce getting really political, obviously Jay-Z.
Yeah, I know that Beyonce was hugely influenced by us.
Well, not exactly influenced, but kind of paved the way.
I think what's really cool is that punk rock has always been a genre that's been defiant, and we were influenced by that, and I think that now is in the greater culture as a whole, and
it's ahead of the curve just on social and economic issues too. I mean, if you go back through the history of activist music, a lot of it was coming from punk rock, and that came from folk music before it, and there's a lineage of empathetic people and people fighting for social justice via their art. So I don't necessarily know where our trajectory is in that lineage. I just know that we've been fortunate enough to be inspired by some really amazing people, and we hope that the records we create, the fact that they get left behind longer than we will be on this earth, that will lead to someone else being influenced by us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, and I'm stoked to hear the rest of American Fall. And also, you guys just started working with Madden, the Madden brothers, and you have like an incredible lineup of different artists that are on a roster. You guys are all recording in like the same building and everything.
Yeah.
Do you think that has helped influence American Fall at all as well?
Well, I definitely think that the songs were written, and we did write a lot of songs in that building without kind of necessarily knowing how influenced it was, how much influence was seeping through the walls, But there's something really interesting about like being isolated in this room, writing a song with someone who, Justin and I have been writing songs together for 20 years, and then you come out of that room, and then in the kitchen is Jessie J, and she's warming up her voice, and she sounds incredible. And then there are these little kids running around, and they're in this band called Water Parks, and you're like, who the fuck are these little kids? and then there's these Australian kids in another room making like crazy beats, and you don't know each other, and you meet each other in that moment, and they poke their head in and they go like, whoa, that's really cool, and you poke your head in their room and you go, whoa, that's really cool, and it's all happening at the same time. So how much we push each other, I don't know, other than like I was well aware of the fact that I was doing vocal takes and screaming in this room, and they could hear me in the so like you want to do a great job, you want to be at the top of
there is almost like there's an audience almost in a way. But also I think anytime you just have a lot of creative people around each other, it creates an atmosphere of that where people end up being more creative, and that's something that I really enjoyed about recording at the Madden studio.
Yeah.
Definitely. And one last question for you guys. Do you think it's more important than ever for bands like you or any band out there with some sort of platform to really speak up for what they believe in?
Well, I always think that people should be true to themselves. And if you see injustice, if you recognize that your life is connected to others, you should be using your vocation to discuss that. I can't tell people what they should or shouldn't do. I think that it would be really naive of us to be like, everyone needs to be a political band, everyone needs to be an activist. But the truth is that every decision you make is a political decision. The way you spend your money, the things you put on and in your body are huge political decisions. And we should be wielding that power with a mindset of empathy. And I think that for us, we only know how to do one thing, and that's to write songs, record music, to share music, and let people know that empathy is the core of those messaging platforms. So I hope that in an era of Donald Trump, in an era of immediacy with communication via the internet and things like that, that people will recognize that there's a lot of power that they're wielding, and that they can do the work that they need to do to spread a positivity in a world that seems really dark right now.
Well said.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming by, sitting down with me, talking with me. And American Fall out November 3rd. I assume you guys are going to be touring on that relentlessly?
Yeah, we have a big U.S. tour with Stray from the Path that starts in January, and then we're going to go around the world from there. So,
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to hearing the rest of American Fall. And we'll be talking soon.
Cool.
Good. Thanks, man.